This is Sage Stoneman. Like a lot of you, he got sick of our sick, toxic, consumerist society, and he decided to take major, decisive action. He bought a cheap plot of land, moved out, and built this cute, charming, ancient mud house for only $300. $300 is all it took for him to build his own house and never have to pay rent again. We're not even talking about getting your own rent down to $300 per month anymore. We're talking a one-time fee of $300 one single time ever, and you never have to pay these ridiculous, exorbitant rent prices again. You get to escape this never-ending toxic burnout cycle, reconnect with nature, and fully pursue your hobbies and passions in life. Art, music, writing, or whatever you want to do, which is exactly what Sage Stoneman is doing. Now, the craziest part about all this was that in a complete different YouTube niche, the very top comment on this video was a lot like a comment I see all the time here on this channel. People say my generation is entitled and expects luxuries handed to them, but this is literally all I want. A little hut in the bush where I can grow vegetables and chickens and make art. Yet, it's so impossibly unreachable. This comment is 1,000% accurate and just so relatable. We're constantly being gaslit by our asshole boomer parents and this toxic consumer society to get a job and chase this soulless corporate ladder. Work hard, study for years, drown in boring lectures and corporate meetings, dedicate your entire life to doing something that doesn't even make you happy so that you can be exploited like a slave for a corporation to get richer and richer off your labor. But Gen Z is rejecting this en masse, and I couldn't be more proud. But we gotta take it even further than this, because they're not just gaslighting and manipulating you into accepting their corporate slavery conditions, they're outright lying to your face, cheating, and stealing from you to force you into slavery. They've literally rewritten and revised the entirety of human history to force you into modern wage slavery. What they're doing isn't just unethical and immoral, it's downright criminal and should be illegal. This was a hell of a rabbit hole to go down, so let's explore it more. Part 2: Ancient Houses. This is a cob cottage house in Devon, UK, that was built sometime in the 1400s. It still stands strongly and reliably today, many centuries after it was built. It's fireproof, earthquake-proof, and even bug-resistant. It even has free heating and air conditioning in the form of high thermal mass of its thick cob walls. It absorbs heat very slowly during the day and releases it just as slowly during the night, meaning that it naturally sustains a very comfortable 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit all year round with no need for any modern HVAC. Viking longhouses were built hundreds of years ago in the absolute harshest winter climates of Scandinavia, where temperatures plunge to as low as minus 30 degrees in the winter. And yet, the interior where people actually lived was a very comfortable room temperature. They told stories, enjoyed beautiful community bonds, and never had to pay rent. The Japanese Minka house is both practical and aesthetically pleasing. It too is earthquake resistant, forever repairable, and takes only a year or two to complete. So if these beautiful ancient houses were so good, then why did we stop building them? You might be thinking that they were unsafe or unstable, prone to collapse, but the opposite is actually true. They are actually more safe and more stable than any modern structure. There are entire multi-story ancient cob skyscrapers in Yemen which have survived for nearly 1,000 years in one of the most dangerous earthquake-prone regions in the entire world. So if that's not the reason we stopped building them, then what is? Well, you're really not going to like this answer. Efficiency. These ancient buildings are simply not very profitable for modern corporations. And of course, as we all know, everything in life has to be about corporate profits now. Forget your own dreams, your own passions, and your own individual freedoms. Be a good little slave and sacrifice everything for corporate profits. The crazy part about these ancient houses is that it doesn't actually take that much specialized skill to learn how to build. And of course, that's why they don't want us doing it. They want us perpetually locked behind paywalls, paying for degrees, paying for permits, licenses, and permission. But Gen Z is seeing through all of this nonsense now, and they're actually starting to escape. This is a video from the channel Natural Buildings, which show a group of 20 or so young people working together to build a beautiful ancient cob house with some modern materials to boot. You don't have to be a specialized construction worker at all, as you see here, and the entire house can be built within a few weeks to a few months. This may look like very brutal physical labor on the surface, but there's a bit of a logical fallacy at play here, which I like to call the peak brutality logical fallacy. When we look at the process of building a cob house, it certainly looks a lot more difficult than sitting in a cubicle and working at an office. But while the peak brutality moments might look worse, we overlook the fact that it only takes about 3 to 6 months to build and own your entire house this way, whereas working in an office literally takes 30 to 50 years for home ownership at this point. The peak brutality logical fallacy has been a long-time staple as a way to gaslight the youth. And so it's important we totally break down this myth once and for all. And that's what we're about to do using one of my favorite personal examples of the Roman gladiator. Part 3. The Roman gladiator. With how piss-poor dog shit the traditional white-collar job market is now, Gen Z is constantly being pushed into just get into the trades. A few of you have asked me for my opinion on the trades and whether or not it's a viable path forward. And don't get me wrong, I'd never discourage anyone from doing it if that's what they genuinely want to do. I just try to be honest and real as possible when it comes to giving my opinion. And the honest statistical truth about getting into the trades is that it's literally more dangerous than being a Roman gladiator. Yes, you heard that right, more dangerous than being one of the most viciously bloodthirsty competitors fighting to death in the legendary Roman Colosseum. Sounds crazy, right? So let's break this down using the numbers. The constant revisionist history to make the past seem universally horrible is largely based on the same logical fallacy which we discussed earlier, where we compare peak brutality in one isolated moment as opposed to looking at the bigger picture of the effects throughout an entire lifetime. The first thing we have to clarify is that the mainstream Hollywood portrayal of Roman gladiators is total absolute hogwash. It was created entirely for entertainment purposes and not historical accuracy. The overwhelming majority of gladiator matches were not a barbaric fight to the death. Roman gladiators were stars, celebrities, fan favorites, and even heartthrobs. They were a hefty financial investment. It took many years and tons of resources to train them. In most instances, sponsors, trainers, and emperors were not going to let such a valuable asset die just because they lost a match. I used to think that every match was a 50-50 death match where someone was guaranteed to die. And you probably thought that too because of this constant revisionist history. But the reality and actual evidence suggest that the real number is closer to about 10%. And even that is heavily skewed up by the fact that most death matches were reserved for the damn naughty, criminals and rebels who were sent to fight as a death sentence and not professionally trained gladiators. For a professionally trained gladiator, the overall death rate over the course of an entire career was only about 5 to 8%, which is shockingly actually on par with many of the more dangerous trade jobs that Gen Z is being pushed into today with how bad the job market is. But how on earth is this possible? We all know that logging, roofing, or being an electrician has some inherent risk, but it can't possibly be as dangerous as literal swords and spears constantly flying at you, right? Well, the answer once again lies within exposing this peak brutality logical fallacy. Once again, while people in the past may have had to work harder and more brutally in isolated peak moments, they worked much less on an overall basis. If we were to compare one single day on the job in the trades to one single Roman gladiator fight, of course the Roman gladiator fight looks a lot more dangerous. But here's the thing, Roman gladiators didn't have to fight every day, every week, or even every month. Most historians estimate that they only had to fight 2 to 4 times per year. A modern day Zoomer, on the other hand, who got pushed into the trades, has to show up to work every single day for years in order to be exploited for as much profits as humanly possible. So far, we've only talked about the amount of days in a year, but if we zoom out and talk about the number of years in a lifetime, time, it looks even more bleak for Gen Z. Roman gladiators got paid extraordinarily well for their fights. Depending on the conditions of a fight, a Roman gladiator could make anywhere between 10,000 to 50,000 sesterces per fight. For context, the annual salary of a middle-class Roman skilled laborer or a soldier at the time was only about 1,000 sesterces per year. So, yes, a single fight could net you literally decades worth of wages. The result was that most gladiators only fought for about 3 to 5 years before earning way more than enough to retire comfortably. By the age of 28, most of them had enough saved up to buy a house, start a family, and afford a comfortable urban lifestyle in the heart of Rome. A Gen Z trade worker, on the other hand, will likely have to work at least 45 years before retirement, and that's being very generous at this point, with how much boomers are draining out of the Social Security fund. So yes, from a peak brutality standpoint, a gladiator fight is definitely more dangerous than working in the trades. But that's the whole point. Viewing this from a narrow peak brutality standpoint is a massive logical fallacy in and of itself, when you take into account the fact that a Gen Z construction worker will literally have to work 300 times more per year and 40 more years over the course of a lifetime. It's clear as day at this point that people in the past had it way better than us, and we've been sold a total lie at this point. Notice how the people telling you that we have it better than ever today are all ideologues and not actual historians. They have no interest in researching history from an objective, factual standpoint. They need the past to be horrible to push their biased ideologies. So they have to reverse engineer history to suit their narrative rather than doing actual historical research. So with that all being said, there's only one question that still remains. How can we relearn the valuable ancient lessons our ancestors knew to escape this toxic wage slave system once and for all? Hey guys, you may have noticed we're getting very close to 50,000 subscribers now. This has always been a huge milestone in our eyes, so if you're new here and enjoying this content, definitely consider subscribing and helping us get closer to this big magic number. Thanks a bunch, you guys are the best. Part 3, how to actually do this. So, a lot of haters will tell you that if you don't want to work in modern society, just go out and live in the woods. No one's stopping you from doing that. But this just goes to show how stupid and ignorant they actually are, as this is just objectively and legally inaccurate. You literally can't just move out onto a random plot of land at this point, even from a legal standpoint. The police are going to harass you back into society if they find you. It's a total scam that we even have to pay to live on land in the first place, as the land of the earth was totally free to create. Humans didn't create, build, or invent the land to begin with, so it makes no sense why we have to pay other humans in order to live on it. But we're just here to talk about solutions today, instead of continuing to complain about problems. So let's talk about how you could actually pull this off. So step 1, you probably have to find a group of at least 5 to 10 friends who'd be interested in pursuing this project and lifestyle alongside you. Building a house like this is theoretically possible on your own, but it requires immense skill and labor. Now, if you can find a group of say 5 friends who are just as sick of being a wage slave as you are off to a very good start already. Step 2. Is to buy a cheap plot of land in an ideal location with lots of space, plenty of natural resources, and minimal zoning laws and building regulations. In the United States, the top 3 areas would be number 1, the Josephine County area within Southern Oregon. This area has minimal building codes, no permit zones, land is cheap at only about $10,000 per acre, and a lot of people there already embrace an eco-friendly lifestyle. Number 2, Texas Hill County. Once again, we have cheap land at $3,000 to $15,000 per acre, minimal zoning laws and building permits required, plenty of clay soil, which is a key building block for these club houses, and lots of sunlight for sustainable solar power in a rural area. And finally, number 3, the northern New Mexico area, which has many of the same features as Texas Hill County. Minimal regulation, plenty of natural clay and straw, cheap land, and plenty of sun for off-grid solar power. Now, for my European audience out there, the best 3 locations I found in my research were southern Spain, Normandy, France, and Transylvania, Romania. These 3 locations all share the same characteristics of cheap land, abundant natural resources, and minimal building regulations, and a surrounding community that still embraces this type of lifestyle and thus would be a lot more open-minded and accepting of it. Now, as far as the process of actually building the house itself, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm not going to get into it too much myself here, but I will leave you links to several other great YouTube channels that specialize in this niche and cover it specifically so that you can take a look for yourself. So, allow me to preemptively respond to a criticism I know I'm bound to get somewhere in the comment section. Oh, so you want to take us back to the Stone Age? You want us to move out of the comfortable modern cities and back into the wilderness in these prehistoric houses? And my answer to that is actually no. I really don't care or give a shit what you want to do. Go out and work a 9 to 5, live in a big city, climb the corporate ladder if you want to. I've literally never said you couldn't or even tried to discourage you from doing that if that's what you want to do. What we have here is another instance of them projecting their own slave master mentality onto us. I've literally never heard a Gen Z try to force a boomer into buying cheap land, moving abroad, or building their own natural home. 100%, and I do mean 100% of the time, it exclusively only happens the other way around. We're the ones who get hardcore shamed and persecuted for not wanting to go to college, not wanting to work a traditional 9 to 5, and not wanting to be constantly nonstop exploited by corporations. Now, this option clearly isn't for everyone. It's probably not even for me personally, if I'm being honest. And that's the whole point. It's not a magic silver bullet solution, and it's not meant to be. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for everyone, but it is a viable alternative that people should know about and have the freedom to pursue if they want to. It's about individual freedom of choice here, and not about everyone in society has to do this or even should do this. So these are the valuable ancient secrets that your ancestors knew that can show us how to build our own homes, and it might just be the only viable way to achieve home ownership in this absurd housing market. But there's an even more valuable secret our ancestors knew when it came to how to live your life in this insane consumerist modern society we all live in. We explore this more in this video right here. Check it out. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.